So there's a hard truth about metal that a lot of bands and fans don't want to hear. That it's not just about the music. Because if it was, then half of your favorite underground bands would be headlining huge festivals right now. And the reason why they're not is because of something that so many bands completely ignore. Image! So what I'm about to put forth is no doubt going to ruffle a few jimmies. And I know that in this video I'm probably in serious danger of sounding like some sort of Finn McKenty LinkedIn marketing guy. That's definitely not the intention. I just think this is a really, really interesting topic and very important topic. But if you spend just a bit of time thinking about it, everything I'm about to say does actually make a lot of sense and is very logical. And if you're a musician or in a band yourself that's really pushing to make it, then you especially should be paying attention. Right, so let's look at some of the most successful metal bands of all time. I'm talking about bands that didn't just succeed, but became monolithic, legendary cultural icons. Judas Priest, Slipknot, Ghost, Sabaton, Iron Maiden, Ozzy Osbourne, Rammstein, Avenged Sevenfold, Cradle of Filth, Limp Bizkit, Cannibal Corpse, Motley Crue, and more recently, Sleep Token. You can instantly recognize these bands not just by their music, but also from their image and their branding. Uniforms, masks, mascots, aesthetic consistency, stage props, symbols, themes, shocking imagery, iconic music videos. I like to think of it as the Pokemon test. Even if you just see the outline or the silhouette of one of these bands or their logos, you instantly know who it is, just as much as when you see something like the McDonald's logo. The uncomfortable reality is that most people aren't musicians and aren't audiophiles. The vast majority of people primarily listen with their eyes. When somebody sees a band live or watches a video of a band online, they're paying attention to the visual aspects a lot more than you might be comfortable assuming. Compare these two scenarios, for instance. Band A walks on stage. They're wearing jeans, random band t-shirts, no props, no visuals, no cohesion, and no identity or personality. Band B walks on stage. They have a unified look, even if it's something really trivial. A simple unified aesthetic, maybe some small live visuals, overall just a visually tight presentation. Even if band A are technically the better band and completely play their asses off, I 1000% guarantee that the vast majority of the audience will walk away from that show remembering band B a lot more, even if they didn't particularly like their music. Every single goddamn time. In this unfortunate reality of overstimulation and oversaturation where everybody's seen everything before, when a band is put forward to someone for the first time, you have an infinitesimally small amount of time to grab their attention and to get them invested. And what can massively help you do that? Image! Something my wife told me a while ago actually really stuck with me. So she went to one of those big European festivals last year, and she said that the band that stuck with her by far from that experience was Powerwolf. She couldn't name you a single one of their songs, but she will always remember the feeling that the spectacle of that live show gave her. Interesting. So I know there's probably a horde of you out there right now furiously typing something along the lines of, what about X band? They didn't need an image to succeed. Yes, you're quite right. There's definitely no shortage of bands out there who didn't need to lean on any sort of like image or visual direction to succeed. Metallica, obviously, Lamb of God, Gojira, Meshuggah, Mastodon, Opeth, Slayer, System of a Down, Megadeth, Dream Theater, Trivium. All of these bands basically put very little to zero amounts of thought into their image and their branding. Yeah, I guess Megadeth have Vic, and like Dream Theater and Opeth have like the iconic album covers and stuff. And Metallica and Slayer have that sort of meme appeal, but that's like an entirely different topic for a different video. But yeah, undeniably, none of these bands lean into image anywhere near as hard as the bands I listed previously. And let's be honest here, guys, these bands that I just listed, these are complete outliers, like total anomalies. nominally. And they definitely do not represent the talent and creativity of your average Joe Schmo, small to mid-sized band. We're talking about some of the most talented bands and musicians to ever do it, who managed to brute force their way to success through sheer talent and innovation. Even still, I would say half of the names on that list aren't recognizable to a wider, more mainstream audience compared to the more image-centric bands from earlier. It's also super important to remember that most of these bands rose to fame in a completely different era. Less competition, less saturation, less internet, thus less inherent need to instantly stand out. It's a completely different landscape today. Honestly though, I do think that the unfortunate self-sabotaging behavior of many metal fans is kind of the root of the problem. Fans often throw around the word gimmick to describe any band that has like a clear visual direction or theme, I guess. Like somehow it's a sort of cheap shortcut to success and a lesser way of doing things. I mean, sure, that can definitely be true also. There's no shortage of like industry plant grifter bands out there who are releasing super low effort music with a strong visual theme or identity, which definitely just exist to pander to a very particular market. However, I do believe that people are smart enough to be able to see through this most of the time. And these sort of bands generally tend to not have a very long shelf life. But honestly, this type of dumb gatekeeping just discourages people and holds bands back. I know that many musicians have a very keen desire to appeal to a particular type of elite, pure, true fan base, and are chronically afraid of being labeled sellouts. But it's so unnecessary, and honestly, these type of fans aren't the fans that grow bands. And perpetuating these sort of ideas is what makes bands lose confidence, I think. You know, when I look at some bands that I know, or I look at like slightly bigger bands where it's so obvious that they're kind of like afraid or too insecure to like have some sort of image. Maybe they don't have the confidence to do it, or they're worried about what people will think. It's such a shame because obviously at the end of the day, music is a creative art form. So imposing any sort of creative limits on yourself is just like, you know, completely nonsense really. Why not have great music and a great image? It doesn't have to be one or the other. And this is where it gets frustrating. There are countless medium-sized, pretty well-known bands out there who have just mind-blowing, amazing music, but basically zero visual identity. Off the top of my head, I'm thinking about bands like Sylosis, The Black Dahlia Murder, Revocation, Orbit Culture, Bleed From Within. Incredible musicianship, incredible songwriting, but honestly, these bands just kind of like blend into one another visually. And whether the fans like to hear it or not, this massively caps a band's potential growth. As new potential fans and casual listeners tend to not deep dive a band, right? Initially, they tend to latch onto what's instantly visually appealing and memorable. Another very important thing to add is that it really has very little to do with the type of music that you play also. You can honestly make basically anything work as long as you're creative. Just take a look at two of the most hot, up-and-coming extreme metal bands at the moment, Imperial Triumphant and Blood Incantation. These guys play insanely left field, uncommercial music to say the least, but are seeing a surprising amount of success, also because of the music of course, but no doubt undeniably helped by the fact that both of these bands have a very clear, appealing visual direction. And another great obvious example is that Canadian duo, the Angine whatever, that have the funny hats and stuff. You cannot tell me that they would be as viral as they've become if it wasn't for the outfits. Because A, that music is pretty weird and like not mass appealing, and B, also like, you know, as far as that type of music goes, nothing to write home about, to be honest. But the overall presentation is genius and works so well. And no, it doesn't necessarily mean that to become a successful metal band these days, you have to wear masks, or you have to dress up as pirates, or space pirates. I mean, unless you want to, it's pretty undeniable that costumes make a band like 10 times easier to market. But 9, a strong image is literally just about consistency and direction. It could be something as super simple as like a matching color palette between your branding and your stage attire, to something as deep as building a whole world and lore around your band for your fans to dive into. At the end of the day, with anything creative, the key is simply to just, well, be creative. So yes, to wrap things up, don't be that band that says, we just want to let the music speak for itself. No. Be the band that says, we just want to let the music speak for itself, while actually looking like a band and not just a bunch of blokes who got off work 30 minutes ago.
All right, mate. Do that, then do that. Nice one.